that too. So, all right. Slide number 2 here, Jeff. We have all quarterbacks who are drafted by year and in the first round. Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so I thought this would be pretty cool to you know isolate quarterbacks. We all know for the NFL and college, it's the most important position on the field that to dictate and influence winning, right? And so I wanted to do that here. I do wanted to do another uh, pre-draft where we look at other position groups and say, hey, what school in the Big Ten is best at the top 3 or whatever at generating offensive linemen? So we plan to do that. So this is the look at quarterbacks, and we all know how vital that is. So, the SEC is number 1. Again, you could see a lot of green here, 24 quarterbacks drafted across the 7 rounds over the last 10 years. So about 1 in 5 quarterbacks drafted are from the SEC. The last 5 years, those numbers have even increased up to 30% the last 5 years in the SEC. So number 2, and this actually doesn't surprise me because the Pac-12 has been known as more wide open offenses, right? Not great defenses, not great running games. And that's reflected here. They're number 2 in quarterback generation, 20 over the last 10 years. So that's 2 per year on average. So about 18%. It did go down the last 5 years. So the Big Ten comes in a disappointing 3rd at generating NFL draft picks, only 17 over the last 10 years, so less than 2 per year. That's 15% of the total. And it's even worse the last 5 years, only 6 picks total in the Big Ten the last 5 years. So this really kind of supports the reputation of the Big Ten. Like, we have really strong defenses. We like to, run the ball. The infamous Big Ten West, of course, was completely offensively challenged because they didn't have the ability to consistently throw the ball. And the data really kind of backs that up here, to be honest here. It's disappointing that it's only 3rd. The ACC comes in 4th, and the Big 12, they're both at 14 each. And then, outside of the top 5, 1 in 5 outside of the Big 5 conferences for quarterback draft picks is pretty impressive, actually, I find, for the other conferences. So they're pretty good at that. And then just looking at table 4, that's first round draft picks. So again, these are who's producing elite prospects at the quarterback position. This is huge, I could tell you, because when you think about wanting to win a national championship and really being a playoff team, this is where if you don't have that really good quarterback, and the better that they are, the more likely you are to be able to break through and actually make the playoffs and do something and maybe even win a national championship. So here, the Pac-12 and the ACC are tied with the most first-round quarterback draft picks over the last 10 years with 8 each. And again, I'm giving some of the details to the folks just listening to the podcast, of course, while maybe, cutting the yard, which I like to do, listen to Zach and JR while, doing the laundry. SEC comes in 3rd, and then the Big Ten, only 4 first-round draft picks over the last 10 years. 3 of them are Ohio State quarterbacks. We have Dwayne Haskins from 2019, Justin Fields from 2021, and of course, CJ Stroud from a couple years ago. JJ McCarthy was the 4th. Was a first-round pick for Minnesota, of course, last year. So only 4. So really, that's a problem child right there. That if the Big Ten wants to make bigger inroads against the SEC, getting better quarterback play, whether it comes from the transfer portal or recruiting, is a must-have. It only makes sense Ohio State, making playoffs during this time period, right? Will Howard is going to get drafted. He's not going to be a first-round pick, but he's going to be up there. And, of course, J.J. McCarthy, Michigan won the national title. Without him at quarterback, they don't win the national title. I know how great their defense was. They ran the ball. They weren't winning it without J.J. McCarthy as the quarterback. They barely beat Alabama, but they did beat them. They were 1 drive away from not getting that done. And McCarthy played really well in that game, just outstanding. So,
Yeah.
definitely need better quarterback play here. Just final comment before I turn it to you, JR, for comments. This is where Penn State comes in, right? Drew Allar, right? Potentially a first round pick this year, but if he plays like a first round draft pick this next year, Penn State could win the Big Ten. They could finally beat Ohio State, and who knows? Maybe they win a national championship. But if he's not playing like that, it just speaks to how important that position is. Jared, what any comments, surprises on this?
Yeah, the elite quarterback conversation is very interesting to me. I Zach and I were talking a little bit about it on the last episode when we were talking about the system QBs and how Drew Aller was labeled a system QB and stuff. And I think it's really interesting how, yes, you do need good quarterback play to, generally be a good team. There's some teams in the Big Ten that get away with that, and other teams nationally that get away with that as well. Typically, they have a very strong defense or some kind of running game that can help handicap that. But you know, the past what 4 or 5, I guess it would be 4 because Stetson Bennett won it twice. The past 4 national championship QBs, only one of them was a first round pick. And that's JJ McCarthy who went 10th, and there were some people that were speculating if he belonged there. He was the fifth quarterback taken, or fifth or fourth, one of those two. Or no, he was the fourth because Bo Nix was drafted after him. But he was the fourth quarterback picked in that draft.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, I don't think you need a first round quarterback to win the national championship. I think before it was really helpful. You go back and look at, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, those guys like Jake Coker, I think was probably one of the only ones, and Cardell Jones. Those were really the only ones before 2020 that won a national championship that weren't first round picks, I believe. But now seems to be kind of, the normal thing for that to happen. And even JJ McCarthy, who was a first round pick, it's not like he was Joe Burrow or anything like that. He was excellent on third down, made really good decisions, but he wasn't
Yeah, that's
Mr.
a good point. Yeah. Yeah, I
So
mean, yeah. I think it's fair to say you need high level quarterback play. And if you don't, you need to have some characteristics where you're super strong strengths in certain areas, which I would say Michigan definitely had. Those Georgia teams, of course, were just off the charts defense and then
right.
other positions. But I hear you. You raise a good thing. It wouldn't be proper to say you have to have that to win it all, but it certainly helps, right? I do think
Yeah.
even like Clemson in their heyday, they had that elite quarterback, right? They had Trevor Lawrence, they had Deshaun Watson. Another thing elite quarterback does for you too is it brings in elite playmakers potentially, right? And if you don't have that player, you're less likely to get some of those. So, Clemson's still really good, but they've dropped off in getting those big time receivers and everything. So that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. I probably should not make it seem like you got to have first round pick to win a title. That would be unfair to say. And the data doesn't support that.
Yeah, probably not to win a title, but like you said, it definitely helps to succeed and do a really good job. I mean, Michigan won the Big Ten their very first year with Cade McNamara as their quarterback, but it wasn't necessarily because Cade McNamara was anything special skill
Yeah.
wise. It was because they had a fantastic running game, and Cade McNamara didn't try to do anything more than he had to. And then we
Yeah.
look what happened when Cade McNamara got to Iowa. You didn't really have a good system, and you didn't really have a good quarterback, and he
I
was
would say
older.
there
Like,
in that example, you can win a lot of games, but like when Michigan faced the Georgia without a really good quarterback, potentially elite, they had no chance with
right, and that's what I'm saying. Like
yeah, yeah,
you can
no,
make the playoffs without one, but
yeah,
generally you get to the playoffs without one, it's probably not going to go well for you.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
all right. So the overall quarterback draft picks, I think just it's really interesting. The Pac-12 was up there, and when you look at the first round ones, the ACC was up there as well. I attribute that more to lack of defense in those conferences rather than quarterback play overall. That's just me. I'm not trying to take any shots at Cam Ward or anything like that, but we saw Kyle McCord at Ohio State having to go up against, Big Ten defenses for an entire year. And yes, he did improve, but he also didn't have the skill around him at Syracuse that he had at Ohio State. We saw that happen. And then moving over to the ACC, he goes there and breaks the ACC record for yards in an entire season. So I think there is something there to the defenses in those two conferences. Well, what used to be the Pac 12 before, but I'm curious your thoughts on that, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, not one data element here explains everything. So I do agree. I mean, I think when you get outside the Big Ten and the SEC, there's just position groups that are sorely lacking across these other conferences, right? So it's more than just a quarterback story. So I do agree with that. It's just, I mean, to me, the quarterback can just allow you to win a couple more games than you wouldn't have during a regular season for sure. So it matters quite a bit from that perspective.
For sure, for sure. Philip says I'm still salty about McCord. I never had ill, I never was a McCord hater. Like I thought he wasn't good enough, but I wished him well at Syracuse. But you know what? If I'm gonna be salty, sure, I'll be salty. Can't stand the guy. If that's better podcasting, I'll be salty. Sure. Johar says, wasn't Mark Sanchez a first round pick? Butt fumble. Yeah, that was a pretty great moment. The butt fumble. Was he a first round pick?
Maybe, but as we all know, first round picks are like 5-star recruits. I like to say anyone knows anything that follows recruiting. 5-star recruit, 1 out of 3 times they're truly a 5-star and they're a stud, and it's Caleb Downs. 1 out of 3 times they turn into a solid, good starter, but that's it. And 1 out of 3 times they're a total bust. And it's probably the same with first round draft picks. It's probably about similar, right?
Yeah, that's what Philip is asking here. He says, how many quarterbacks were artificially, well, somewhat, oh, he was saying a different comment that, but we'll go with this. What Philip says here, he says, how many quarterbacks were raised up in the draft by winning a title? I mean, just by memory, Joe Burrow, first overall pick. I mean, he's been good with the Bengals. He's had some injuries. Maybe you would expect him to be better, but the Bengals don't really put talent around their quarterback as much, I don't think. I mean, they have good wide receivers, but they haven't really had an offensive line. Deshaun Watson, before he got in trouble, he was pretty good.
I don't think it raises you up, but I definitely think someone would say, you know what, he won a national title, obviously probably a strong leadership. Let's at least draft him somewhere. I don't see people stretching, and doing a first round pick for someone just because you won a title. You got to have all the other measurables and everything like that. But if you're getting into the later rounds, then taking someone who knows winning, right? And if you're winning, you're probably a pretty good leader at least. I think that would allow you to more likely get drafted based on that than not, is what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, Will Howard is probably going to be a third or second round pick, and I don't think he goes that high if he doesn't win the national championship. Now, part of that was because he looked much, much better in the playoffs than he did at times during the season, but this was also a guy that broke the record, I think, for the most games with 80% or more completion percentage, I think it was at Ohio State. So he did do that, but yeah, I don't think Will Howard gets up near the second round unless he had that playoff performance. People say JJ McCarthy was artificially raised up by the title. I don't know. He didn't play particularly well in the Washington game. Like he did play well in the Bama game, but yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I mean, I think he's TBD. It's to be determined. I mean, even when he was at Michigan, everyone said, they're going to run their Michigan offense and they're not going to change it just because they have a more talented quarterback. So they expanded the playbook a little bit, but they really didn't. And he didn't have big weapons to throw to, right? So I think it's to be determined how good of a quarterback he is. I would not say, he's way overrated, blah, 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 or we need to see. I mean, he didn't really have a chance to really show what he had from, going after big statistics perspective. But in clutch moments in the playoffs, he played really well. He played really well in those playoff games for sure. So,
yeah,
and that's telling, right? That's pressure and handling
Yeah,
pressure, and that's big time.
for sure. For sure. Philip says Bennett. I think he's talking about Stetson Bennett.
Yeah.
I don't think he was propped up at all. He was what, a fifth round pick?
But he got drafted. If he wasn't on Georgia playing and everything, he probably wouldn't have been drafted, right? If he was on
Wow.
some
Yeah,
other at that size, he wouldn't have been drafted. He'd been a free agent for
that's
someone.
true.
Yep.
That's true. John says Will Howard is probably going to go third, fourth round. Honestly, no shade on Howard, but the quarterback market is kind of bad right now, and not a lot of teams need a starter. He could go third or fourth. I saw somebody talking about second the other day, so I could be wrong, or that could just be one guy's opinion and not be the sentiment amongst everybody. To be honest, I listen to more Big Ten coverage than I do NFL draft coverage. That's
I
just
mean,
me, but
his size makes him appealing too. I mean,
that
that
does.
big run and playing really well in games that matter and the pressure is on, it was huge. But then he also has the size. He doesn't have the big time arm and everything, but he showed he's tough and all that. And all those things matter, right? And definitely leadership skills. I think the belief is for sure that he has strong leadership skills.
Pit Snipe, last one, and then we'll move on. Pit Snipe Husker says 2 titles didn't help Tommy Frazier get drafted.
Different
LOL.
era.
Look, yeah. Benger was picked to go pretty high, but gravity. Yeah, I don't. I'll be honest. I was not paying too much attention to the Tommy Frazier NFL draft. Jeff, that's going to be more your angle there.
That is. I mean, Tommy Frazier was a system quarterback, talented guy. I mean, similar. Notre Dame won a national championship with was it Tony Rice, 1988? Aging myself, sorry, but just really good athletic quarterback. But could make some throws, the throws he needed to make, but really had no shot making in the NFL. Same with them. So yeah, that. I mean, Nebraska, that was their system, right? It was just a different era altogether, and that was before the proliferation of the passing offenses, right?
Yeah, and I mean, athletic quarterbacks didn't really start gaining traction as somebody that teams were, thinking as highly of until Lamar Jackson, if I'm not
As,
incorrect.
as
RG3 was
combined
up there.
passers and catchers, you mean?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
There's been
RG3 was up there, but him getting injured so early in his career, I think hurt athletic, more mobile quarterbacks. But Lamar Jackson, with what he's been able to do, I mean, there were people that were just drooling over Trevor Lawrence because of the body type and the ability to run and everything. And I don't think he's been bad at, Jacksonville, but I think they probably were looking for more from him.
yeah. They
Again,
they
not an
definitely look
NFL
for more
expert.
mobile quarterbacks for sure than they used to, and they where in the past they looked at it as well. If they run, they're going to get hurt, and then but that's changing a little bit because some of these current mobile quarterbacks are bigger quarterbacks, right? When you think of Josh Allen, like for example,